What is Asperger syndrome? Part 3. Other symptoms. People with Asperger syndrome may have signs or symptoms that are independent of the diagnosis, but can still greatly affect the individual. These include differences in perception, as well as problems with motor skills, sleep, and emotions. Perception. Individuals with Asperger syndrome often have excellent auditory and visual perception. Many may demonstrate enhanced visual memory and the ability to perceive small changes in patterns, such as arrangements of objects or well-known images. Many accounts of individuals with Asperger syndrome report unusual sensory and perceptual skills and experiences. Frequently, this includes reports of being unusually sensitive to light, sound, or other stimuli, which can affect their daily life by various degrees. These sensory responses are not specific to Asperger syndrome and are found in other developmental disorders. Clumsiness. Hans Asperger's initial accounts and other diagnostic studies include descriptions of physical clumsiness. Children with Asperger syndrome may be delayed in acquiring skills requiring motor dexterity, such as riding a bicycle. They may seem to move awkwardly or appear uncomfortable in their own skin. They may have poor coordination or have an odd or bouncy gait or posture. They may show problems with balance, visual motor integration, or proprioception, the sense of body position. There is no evidence that these motor skill problems differentiate Asperger syndrome from other forms of high-functioning autistic spectrum disorders. Sleep. People with Asperger syndrome are likely to suffer from sleeping problems. This includes difficulty in falling asleep, as well as frequent nighttime and early morning awakenings. Emotions. Asperger syndrome is associated with high levels of alexithymia, which is a difficulty in experiencing, expressing, and describing emotional responses. It has often been said or implied that people with Asperger's do not feel emotions. Possibly the most dysfunctional aspect of Asperger syndrome is a lack of demonstrated empathy, feeling the emotions of others. In the past, it was assumed that those with autistic spectrum disorders could not experience empathy because they lacked a theory of mind. In other words, they couldn't understand what others thought or felt, so there was nothing to trigger empathy. Those with autistic spectrum disorders may be lacking in cognitive empathy, predicting how people will behave in response to their emotions and understanding why they react in the ways they do, but there is a vast amount of evidence that these individuals actually suffer from a surplus of emotional empathy rather than a deficit. Findings from numerous studies have shown that not only do those with autistic spectrum disorders experience empathy, but they actually experience it to a greater degree than non-autistic neurotypical people. Evidence suggests that the amygdala, a brain structure critical to emotional response, may be over-responsive in those with autistic spectrum disorders. Many people who spend time with autistic individuals have noted that they tend to be extremely intuitive regarding the emotional states of others. Numerous studies indicate that rather than lacking empathy, those with autistic spectrum disorders are overwhelmed by it. For example, adults with Asperger syndrome scored similarly to neurotypical control subjects on an empathy questionnaire. The only difference was that those with Asperger syndrome scored much higher on measures of personal distress. The erroneous belief that people on the autistic spectrum lack empathy arose from traditional autism theories, positing that those with autism lack a theory of mind, or that autism is an extreme form of the less empathetic male brain. The lack of empathy assumption was believed to be corroborated by those with autistic spectrum disorders achieving relatively low scores on certain empathy tests, avoiding social interaction, and making blunt statements that hurt the feelings of other people. However, those with autistic spectrum disorders may learn to suppress or avoid their empathetic responses as a means of self-protection. Insensitive statements or actions often stem from an inability to predict the impact they will have on others. People on the autistic spectrum may inadvertently hurt the feelings of others because they lack the social understanding to anticipate how the other person may feel about what is said to them. People with autistic spectrum disorders are often intensely sorry to discover that they have inadvertently hurt someone's feelings, which is a strong indication that no harm was intended. The world of those with autistic spectrum disorders is one of heightened senses and emotions, where everything is intensified, both positive and negative. People on the autistic spectrum have difficulty identifying and regulating their emotions, so they may often avoid distressed individuals to prevent any emotional over-arousal. In other words, the empathy response is so strong that the individual may be too confused or traumatized to offer comfort or support in an emotional crisis. It has been suggested that those with autistic spectrum disorders socially withdraw, behave inappropriately, or obsessively attend to details in emotionally charged situations to protect themselves against extreme emotional arousal. Avoiding eye contact or looking at faces altogether is one of the strategies those with autistic spectrum disorders use to minimize their empathetic response. Overloaded by emotion, the person with an autistic spectrum disorder may simply walk away from someone who is upset, as a form of self-defense, and thus appear to be cold and uncaring. However, some people with autistic spectrum disorders, particularly at the high-functioning end of the continuum, are able to manage their feelings of emotional overload sufficiently so that they can provide comfort or support to a friend or family member in need. Numerous anecdotal reports from those on the spectrum suggest that people with autistic spectrum disorders have difficulty separating their feelings from those of others. They pick up and reflect the emotions of others, so if those around them are expressing negative emotions or attempting to suppress them, the person with an autistic spectrum disorder will be more likely to express negativity. Therefore, it's extremely important that those who live and work with people on the autistic spectrum cultivate positive emotional states whenever possible.